Hi everyone, welcome to Commissioner Wilson's office, and we are interviewing our new hire, our little policy aide, Hannah Gutner.
Well, I've been here for about 2 months now, but I'm a behind the scenes person. This is my behind the scenes office, which is why it looks different.
Yes, and we've just been really bad at working a million miles a minute, and we haven't been able to formally introduce her to the community. Hi Hannah.
Hey,
How are you feeling about working here in the county?
I love my job. It's the best job that I think exists
Yeah?
in the world.
Okay, why?
I get to learn about the millions of things the county does, and frankly, it's a real privilege to be able to get involved in your local government. And if I wasn't being paid, frankly, as a job, even though I want to be involved, it's really hard to keep up. So I feel really lucky that I get to learn about all the things the county is doing every single day, and I actually am allowed to dedicate, 10 hours a day to learning about it and trying to improve it in whatever way we can. So that's why I like it, and I like learning all the time.
Super
And
exciting.
reading.
Super exciting. So let's go back to kind of how we met. So you just cold emailed a friend of mine, and he introduced us. Maybe you can talk about that experience and why you were looking for new opportunities.
Yeah, so I graduated University of Florida, Go Gators,
Go Gators.
in December, last December, and I moved to Orlando to live with my partner, Josh, who goes to the medical school here. And so I was looking for a full-time position, and in the meantime, I had been working for the Florida Senate part-time, so I was looking for something to kind of get my feet wet in local government at the county level, because I hadn't done that before. And I had a friend who suggested I reach out to our mutual friend, as he is very involved, and he introduced Lee and I at first was an intern, and now I'm here.
So you have a lot of really awesome interests that I think really complement things that I like, because I am way more in the environmental world. You all know that I'm a climate activist, so I'm very big on the community building component of what I do, but I don't really know a lot about some of the things that you're super passionate about. So you teach me a lot every day. Maybe talk a little bit about some of your interests.
I think my main interest usually ends up going back to smart growth, because I think there's a lot of overlap between smart growth and suburban sprawl and protections for rural communities and ensuring that an urban service area is urban. And it's actually kind of fun fact, I only realized the importance of urban planning about 2 years ago. My brother convinced me to read a book called Suburban Nation, and it's really good. And all of a sudden, I realized that all the things we talk about, like, oh, it's so weird how this is made this way. It sounds silly, but you take it for granted. Things don't just happen. They're all deliberate decisions, and they're made right here in this building.
Yeah.
And so it's really exciting to be able to be a part of that, and realizing as well at a local government level, it's not so partisan, which is a little bit liberating given the political climate. And it's really more a matter of how do we want our county to look over the next decade or two, and it's that long-term thinking, that nonpartisan thinking, and that vision for the future that's so exciting to be around, and knowing that preventing sprawl helps save the environment and helps maintain water quality, because it's fewer paved wetlands and things like that. Even if they're class 3 wetlands, which is the lowest tier, they don't matter as much as the really important ones. And so there are a lot of really good protections we have in place for the environment. And my degree in college was environmental management, so I care about that a lot. But I've kind of used that as a segue into seeing how we use our land, because I think that's the most important aspect of government, is land use.
Awesome. So
civic engagement.
Smart growth, for those of you who kind of hear that term but you really don't understand what it all encompasses, maybe you can dissect it, because I think it kind of spurts out other interests that I see you get really lit up about, all in this very intertwined subject matter. So just maybe dissect it a little bit and talk about what that means.
Yeah, I would say smart growth is kind of like it's the recognition of systems thinking, honestly, because so much of our lives are siloed in so many ways because it's easier to bite off many big pieces of life you have to deal with when they're in individual silos. But life doesn't actually work that way. It's all a big system, and smart growth, in my opinion, recognizes that. And so when we talk about housing issues or transportation issues, they have to be somewhere, right? And they have to intersect usually. And so that's where, in my opinion, smart growth, infrastructure, comes in, and that's that thinking where we're thinking, okay, sure, we need more affordable housing, but if it's all the way in the middle of nowhere, we're not just getting housing, we're also getting roads, road expansions, fire stations, schools, grocery stores, gas stations, etc. All this new infrastructure that wasn't there before is now moved elsewhere, when potentially there were opportunities in areas that already have some of those amenities. And so that smart growth thinking is thinking about, it's not just the housing complex and it's not just a road expansion, it's why and how they all work together in one way. That's how I would dissect it personally. Full disclosure, not a planner by trade, just for fun.
You just read a lot of planning books. That was one of the things that pushed us into wanting to hire you, was you were like, I'm reading like 5 books on urban planning right now all at the same time. And I'm like, what? Who does that?
I'm a big reader. I like my options,
Yeah, but, I would have to say I'm still learning a lot about the whole political process. And when I first asked you, what are some of your interests, you definitely brought up smart growth and all that it encompasses, but you also brought up legislation and how government works. I know there's, local and then state and then federal, and it's all kind of like functioning as these living entities governing and making decisions. But when it comes to the local level first, what really inspires you in terms of this legislation, and what policies are tangible to this job that you really get inspired by?
Last week, we talked about it, and it was in the newsletter, but last week on the consent agenda and the Board of County Commission's agenda, so the consent agenda is basically a list of sometimes 100 different items that we're passing all at once because they're non-controversial. And usually what's in those is funding for affordable housing. And so it's a big 100-page packet. But if you actually read it, the stuff that we're doing is remarkable. And that includes stuff like funding 63 permanent housing opportunities for disabled individuals and homeless individuals and people who have been survivors of domestic violence. And that inspires me because it gives the timeline, first of all, which I appreciate, that realistic, okay, this is actually going to be fully spent by 2026, so it takes a long time to actually build those things. But it's very exciting to be able to feel like there are so many problems in the world, right, and you want to do something about them, and to look around at the county level and see, okay, actually there are a lot of people here working on them. There are 8,000 people here working on them, and we're all coming at it from different angles, but they're getting done, and that's really exciting to me.
Well, I have kind of a curveball, idea that I want you to kind of answer because your brain works this way. So we've been learning a lot about when changes can be made in this already moving body of government, right? So we're learning about how policy is basically written and analyzed, and where the accountability comes in, and who's looking holistically at the county. And it seems like sometimes a lot of parts of the county are working in silos, and it really takes an elected official with a new perspective that was voted by the people to voice the concerns in the decision-making process to basically make those changes, right? What are some of the changes, even in kind of how that whole system works, that you would like to see here at the local level?
Okay, well, that's a tough one. I think one of the biggest challenges that the county faces is communication. We have an amazing communications team. and it's for all the important things that people care about. But I think there's a lot of important things that not enough people care about that don't always get attention. And I mean, full disclosure, we are working on that with these departments right now, and I really appreciate their openness. But every time there's a road widening, for example, me coming at it from a biker and a walker's perspective, I bike to work, and that's a total privilege. And it's not a pleasant bike ride either, but I prefer to over driving because I hate driving. But when those road widenings happen, I think there are people who would want to know, and they don't until it's actually happening, because we think, oh, well, this is just run-of-the-mill services, this is how we've been doing it, and whatever. But especially in Commissioner Wilson's position, she got elected in large part on the fact that her platform is a big part of smart growth. And that means less road widening and more multimodal options and public transit and biking and walking. And so every time there's a road widening and we don't know about it until it's actually happening, I mean, this week we've been facing a lot of issues in the Water Spring area because we've had new elementary and middle schools coming up because people are moving out there, because development was approved out there. And the roads aren't complete, and the crosswalks aren't complete, and there aren't crossing guards, and kids are walking to school in unsafe situations. And that is on all of us. We should have all communicated better, but I think that is something that could be improved. In terms of the development process itself, I think the county is really good at reaching out to our office to see if we want community meetings when they know something might be a little controversial. It's just we're in a tough spot because we are doing Vision 2050, which is amazing and so exciting. And if you don't know about Vision 2050, you should really look it up. It'll come up right on ocfl.net. You look up Vision 2050, all the recorded town halls are there that gives you the whole rundown. And then we're actually going to have another BCC workshop on August 24th about Vision 2050, and that's going to be the final workshop before its adoption, I believe, in September or October. So Vision 2050, in sum, is basically we're redoing the whole code that dictates building, and that's setbacks and density and open space requirements and parking requirements and it's basically we're moving from a single-use code that dictates all the strip plazas you see into a form-based code that says, okay, there are a lot of bus stops around here. Why don't we increase the density around here, bring the buildings closer to the sidewalks, widen the sidewalks, and just make this an area where people want to be and is appropriate, right? Because if people are taking the bus, they are presumably walking to the bus stop from somewhere else. And so that walking environment should be safe, at the very least. And so the problem is that Vision 2050 is going to be amazing, but most of our district will have been fully built out by the time Vision 2050 is implemented, because many of the developments were approved as early as 2004 into 2017, 18, 19, and even 2020.
Yeah.
So that's our biggest challenge in our office, and the continual challenge of staff here, and I see them trying their best to mitigate this all the time, is when developers want to build stuff to code, which is their right, because that's the code, and we're trying to kind of negotiate and ask them to build stuff according to what Vision 2050 would ask when it's implemented in a year. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot that I'm sure we'll get to do more of these, that we can kind of really dissect every piece, but part of kind of your background is that you also worked at the state. And something that really has been a really hard learning curve for me personally is how we as a county look at each individual case separately, and how property rights and property laws, feels like all of our laws are kind of curved towards corporations and entities more so than walkability and livability and quality of life for human beings and for nature. But how the state also dictates and preempts us from being able to invest in our community. It's been a really hard learning curve to figure out a way to navigate all of those factors and, you know, at this level, champion some of those things like public transportation, you know, because there's so many restrictions and how we get money and what we're allowed to actually charge a developer for. And so, like, you know, do you see, you know, the way that the state plays into what we do as some of the major threats to some of the things that we know we need here at the county? Like, what do you see as some of those obstacles right now?
I would definitely say so. I mean, this is something that pervades every conversation, is the political polarization we're dealing with in this country, and it's especially prevalent in Florida with Governor DeSantis going out of his way to, well, I guess I'll keep it a little bit real. He's giving speeches in other states while kids are dying of COVID, and fighting political fights for his presidency campaign. Totally my opinion, full disclosure.
No, it's totally true. But it feels like it's shackling local municipalities.
Yes,
from being
and
able
a lot
to do
of the
things.
bills are not written well. Many of the bills passed last session are being challenged in courts because there's simply no way for local governments to accurately enforce them. They're just hoops to jump through for the county. I mean, for example, you know, you've heard about our transportation impact fees if you've been tuning in here. The commissioners talked about it plenty, and we were preempted by the state to have a cap on transportation impact fees, and really the cap is the magnitude by which we can raise them and the timeline of that. In order to bypass it, you need to do a demonstrated needs study. And thank God it's not such a huge deal, except that it wastes staff time for like 6 months, and we need that money in order to accommodate the new developments far away, because that money goes directly to the resources we talked about with the roads and the fire stations, police, etc. And in addition to that, you know, there was a bill passed making anonymous code complaints illegal, and that's something that affects local government because we get a lot of anonymous code complaints, and that's how we deal with, you know, potentially bad actors in the community. And if there's a potential neighbor dispute, you don't want to get in the way of it, they're anonymous, it's all good, and now that's taken away. There was a bill passed preempting local governments from building infrastructure that basically disfavors gas infrastructure and oil infrastructure, and moves towards renewable energies. And it's those kinds of sneaky preemptions, aside from all the social justice stuff that went on this session. It preempted firearms regulation, all these things that it doesn't make sense to me on a personal level, because at this point it's being all these bills are being carried by people who are by name Republicans, and to me the Republican ideology is less government, you know, and that's actually for home rule, not against it. And if, you know, Leon County and Bradford County, you know, they don't, Columbia County, Levy, Dixie, you know, you all have your own challenges, and we should never try to dictate what's going on in your counties. And the same shouldn't happen here. And so it's frustrating for me to have worked in the legislature and feel like a lot of it is happening, a lot of the bills are being passed for political sake and not taking into account the needs of the people in those counties. And I would think actually less preemption would be a more Republican ideology by principle, but that's not the case right now, and so that is definitely frustrating.
Well, in closing, when Hannah closes her eyes and thinks about a perfect Orange County, what do you see?
I see.
You can have it all. You can have it all.
I see Vision 2050. I see downtown Orlando. Honestly, I live downtown, and I never thought I would have said this because I'm a huge backpacker, huge environmentalist, but I actually kind of like being in such a dense area. I would see better bike infrastructure. I would definitely take better bike infrastructure and safer bike infrastructure. I've had a few close calls on my way to work. And I wear a safety highlighter vest and a helmet, and people still don't see me because they're frankly just not looking. I would also take a continual driving education. Sorry, now I'm just getting on it. You said I can have everything. I, myself as well, as a driver, I would have more people, if they want to renew their license, they should take another driving course.
Yeah.
Because I really think there's a lot of confusion. And I would have multilingual communication all the time, and more pedestrian and bike friendly areas with more trees and more tiny pocket parks and less parking. That would be my dream.
I would love to build off of that and add
and clean water.
Just conservation surrounding those dense areas, because unfortunately a lot of the urban sprawl issues that we're seeing and a lot of growth is outside of that urban corridor that is then causing a strain on our roads and a strain on our infrastructure and a strain on the people's quality of life who have to spend more than 45 minutes in a car just to be able to get to work. And it kind of traps us into this car mindset that we can't break out of. It feels very similar to being trapped to our obsession with plastic, where like I want to be a good consumer, but I really have no other option when you go to the store. And that's what it feels like for people that are moving into places like Horizon West or into places like, you know, out past UCF. There's some developments that are taking place out there, or passed by Split Oak. You know, those areas are going to be pretty much enslaved to their vehicles, and they're not going to have options to be like Europe, where they can bike and then just lock up their bike to go on a bus, and then from the bus they can take a train easily.
And you could drive too if you want.
If you want.
Driving would be safe,
but
it wouldn't be the only option.
Because you can eat a panini in Italy and be on the bus.
And have Wi-Fi.
And things like that, and get to see your beautiful community and pay attention to the landscape because you're not in traffic honking in the heat. Ugh, what a world that would be.
Woohoo!
Not to mention preserving our tree canopy and our clean water, but we'll go on and on and on. Yeah. Maybe just tell us a little bit about the conversation you're going to have with Mr. Thomas Tart today.
You all should stay tuned for just a few moments, because speaking of public transit, Mr. Thomas Tart and I are going to have a conversation from 4 to 5 in lieu of our virtual office hours with the commissioner about transportation in Florida. And we're going to go way back, baby. We're going to go all the way back to Spanish and French in the 1500s. And we're going to hit it on the head. You know, Mr. Tart, he is basically an amateur historian, recipient of Florida's Lifetime Achievement Award, University of Florida's. He's a Rotarian, he's a lawyer, he's former VP of Orlando Utilities Commission, and he is incredibly knowledgeable, and he's going to give us a fantastic presentation on the history of Florida. And we're gonna go over steamboats, because those were our highways, and we're gonna go over trains and Plant and Flagler and Jacob Summerlin, the first mailman in the area. So it's going to be a really good time. And just to give you a little peek, did you know that Orlando used to be called Jernigan? And it was named after Aaron Jernigan, who was one of the first white settlers here. So, fun fact, stay tuned for more. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you all are too.
Thank you all so much for your time. And Hannah, any closing thoughts?
Thank you so much. Stay active. Sign up for our newsletter, and have a wonderful day.